All that could be heard was the sound of the rain, the voices from the kids' TV program Maria was watching, and the engrossed Maria's cackling voice. In other words, what greeted them as they returned dumbfounded from that horrible, bizarre scene was the voice of Maria as she rolled around laughing at the TV. Those who returned to the room didn't know how to explain to Maria that her mother was dead, or trapped by a suffocating silence. At first, Maria returned their stares with a dubious look. But when she realized they weren't trying to blame her for anything, she ignored them and again immersed herself in the TV program. I know, right? Such a good thing that Maria just wanted to watch TV. Children wordlessly sat down heavily on the sofa. Their minds were probably blank from their state of shock. Everyone had already cried and mourned so much, but now they just vaguely sat there, their faces seeming to have lost all emotion. Only Kenan had returned to his usual calm expression. However, that probably didn't mean he'd been able to wipe out the shock. Nothing was reflected in his eyes as he stared into empty space. Hideyoshi kept on fidgeting, and every time he remembered that horrible scene, he started muttering about how he couldn't believe it, how it couldn't have been something from this world, how it must have been the work of demons. Every now and then, his mutterings produced a question directed at Nanjo. But the latter kept repeating in a calm, doctor-like manner that nothing could be understood by only glancing at the scene, and that until the police arrived, they wouldn't learn anything. However, Nanjo only appeared calm next to Hideyoshi, who simply couldn't suppress his agitation and fear. In fact, Nanjo had also received a huge shock, and his face was deathly pale. Maybe that atmosphere was why she tried to rise to the challenge and take charge. Natsui appeared to be unchanged from her normal attitude, and she briskly gave directions. We'll go see father. Genji, quickly contact the police. Certainly. Wonder if you would allow me to tag along, Natsui-ne-san? As Cross-Nisan is now gone, the task of aiding father has been left to me. It would be improper of me to relax here while relying entirely on you. Natsui was struck speechless by Eva's aggressive move in a situation like this. She seemed to be claiming that, with Kraus dead, the one to take responsibility shouldn't be his wife, but herself, the next highly ranked in the family. Maybe she hadn't been at all happy when Natsui took command without reference to her in such an extreme situation. However, even Eva's mind had been blank from shock until a moment ago. She only came to her senses after Natsui started giving orders. These people really are vultures. Yeah, I definitely agree. Just do as you like. Natsui started walking without saying a word more. Eva followed behind her. As they did, Kumasawa ran into the parlor. She usually wasn't the kind of person to run around, so under normal conditions, most people would have taken her entrance as a sign that something was the matter. But because everyone was still stricken with shock, they hardly even noticed her. Madam. You're looking for Natsui-ne-san. She went to see father. Probably be back soon. What happened, Kumasawa-san? You see, in the dining hall, there was blood. Blood! The ears of everyone in the parlor twitched. Everyone thought the same thing. I hope I misheard that. Any container can only hold so much, and no one here would be capable of handling yet another tragedy. So they all thought it. I hope I misheard that. What happened? The dining hall. When I went to the dining hall to set up for breakfast... First one to start running was George. His harsh footsteps jogged Hideyoshi and Nanjo to their senses, and they chased after him. Battler and the others followed. They flew into the dining hall one after another, but they didn't find any change that might have caused Kumasawa to go pale. Those who had viewed the gruesome scene in the storehouse, it was a bit of an anticlimax. However, Kumasawa, who had followed them, pointed it out. There really were some traces of blood remaining on the floor. Compared to that terrible scene, it wasn't very impressive. However, if you calmly thought about it, this definitely indicated the loss of a lot of blood. There's another puddle of blood over here. What in the world? It appears that a great deal of time has passed. Probably safe to say they were killed here last night. Definitely looks that way. Did anyone fill in Kumasawa? Yet, I'm hoping that's the case. We were talking together in the dining hall until late into the night. After that, someone must have forced their way in. Dad, when did you and Mom slip out of the meeting and go to sleep? It was a little past midnight, so we probably should assume it happened after that. Are you kidding me? Give me a break. Lady, please stay strong. Hey, after seeing that hell on earth in the storehouse, this is nothing. Really? Good for you. I feel like my head's gonna explode. This is the dining hall, right? Every day, this is where I'd eat, complain about school, complain about homework, talk to my dad about my grades. That's what this place is to me. Milady, it wouldn't be good to remain here any longer. Let's return to the parlor. I agree. Uncle Hideyoshi, I think this room will be real important to the police. Don't you think it'd be bad if we trampled all over it? Battler proposed this in a slightly firm voice as, along with Cannon, he grabbed the pale and shaking Jessica's shoulders. Everything's just as Battler-san has said. There is nothing more to be gained from remaining in this room. Nanja spoke while looking at everyone's pale faces. Even though that horrible scene in the storehouse felt like something not of this world, at least then we'd been able to leave, to cut ourselves off from that place and run away. Everyone had shared in that feeling. However, this dining hall was different. In the mansion, the main building of this estate, as Jessica had said, it should have been one of the most calming places even inside the mansion. It was where all of the relatives had eaten lunch and dinner yesterday. The shock of seeing this place smeared with blood reminded us of that horrible spectacle in the storehouse, and forced us to accept that we hadn't really been able to run away from the scene of that tragedy. I agree too. The culprit might have left traces in this room. Amateurs like us shouldn't stir the place up. Quickly. Hideyoshi also understood the meaning of what Battler-san had said. Pushed everyone to hurry out of the dining hall. The way we were then, looking at that blood any longer would have been too harsh. Nobody went against his words. Everyone raised each other out of the dining hall. It was almost as though the last person in the room would be trapped in there all alone. The tensing is weird on this. Sometimes it's we, sometimes it's they, sometimes it's hard to tell where the narrator is because the pronouns are mucking all over the place. Once in the hallway, we lent a hand to Kumasawa, who was still trembling and leaning against the wall, and we all headed back to the parlor together. Then Genji returned. Oh, Genji-san, were you able to contact the police? As to that, I'm afraid I must apologize. I don't know if it was a failure of the radio or something else that caused it, but... So you couldn't contact the police? Both the phone and the radio failed. My apologies. A boat will be arriving on Monday morning, and I believe you will be able to borrow their communications equipment. Isn't there a boat on this island? Can't we just take a little trip out to the Nijima Police Department? Hideyoshi-san, that would be impossible in this weather. At the very least, we can't do anything until the typhoon passes us by. Proud-sama's boat is being repaired and is not on the island. Therefore, we must wait for the boat coming on Monday. How could this happen? 6 people are dead. The phones and radio aren't working and there's no boat? So until the typhoon passes and the boat comes, in other words, until tomorrow morning, we're gonna be stuck here on this island, unable to contact the police, aren't we? Which means that, not just us, but the criminal who killed everyone is also confined to this island. That certainly follows. The culprit who killed everyone is still here on the island. So the bastard who killed Dad and the others must still be in hiding somewhere, unable to escape. Damn it! I'll catch that bastard. No way I'll hand him over to the police. I'll slice him to bits myself. Ah! Maria had finally realized that something odd was happening in the parlor. Took you long enough, child. Rather than noticing something odd, it was probably better to say she felt unhappy and neglected since everyone was getting so excited about something only she didn't know about. Ah, child. Ooh. Just go, Ne-chan. Someone die? The way she spoke was completely calm. Just as though she was talking about someone who had appeared on a television drama, as though it was someone else's problem. Jessica probably didn't like that. As though trying to say, can't you tell just by looking at me, overwhelmed with grief, she flared up at Maria. They all died. Everyone. My dad and Battler's parents. Goto-san and Shannon, and even your mother, too. Stop it, Jessica-chan. You're the only one who's sad. Maria-san, I know this will come as a shock, but please listen. Your mother has died. Mama died? Huh? Yeah, someone killed her. I know it's sad, but stay strong. How many people died? 6 people. 6 people. Damn it! How could anyone do something that cruel? There's a limit to how cruel you can be if you're human. I don't know who it is, but the culprit isn't human. There's no way their blood is red. I think Maria's putting it... Yes, these kids are not future grief counselors. I think Maria's putting it together. The culprit isn't human. It's just the blank chosen by the blank. Huh? Hey, Maria, did you say something just now? Maria had just said something, but since the words were so remotely separated from the flow and context of the conversation, I couldn't understand them for a second. When I tried to ask her to repeat it again, I was shocked by the sudden sound of Aunt Natsui's loud voice coming from the entrance to the parlor. It looked like Aunt Natsui and Aunt Eva had returned from their trip to see grandfather. You can't contact them, even with the radio? If we can't use it at a time like this, why do we even have an emergency radio? My apologies. It was supposed to have a maintenance inspection every year. Wait, don't you have one of those boat signaling devices that makes a flashing light? Couldn't you use that to contact the next island? We do not have such equipment. My sincere apologies. Just then, Kumasawa arrived. I bet you if they did, the light bulb would be broken or something. Kumasawa arrived, pushing a serving cart loaded with breakfast. Since there was no way we'd be able to eat in the dining hall, Hideyoshi had ordered her to take it to the parlor. Why are we eating breakfast in here? Natsui-san, I'll tell you later. More importantly, Eva, how was father? Judging by the fact that he is not with you, it seems he will not leave his room, not even for a situation like this. He wasn't there. The room was empty. What the? Where could he have gone at a time like this? Do you mean to say the master has left his study? That is correct. I was surprised myself. I wonder when he left his room. Do any of you have an idea? Natsui looked at Genji and Kennen as she said this. Maybe she was trying to ask whether the servants who served directly under the one-winged eagle knew of a place he might go. However, it was probably the other way around. Their faces made it clear that those who knew Kinzo best realized even more than the rest how impossible it was for him to leave. Even we have no idea. As you all know, within that study, the master had everything from a place to sleep to a bathroom. I couldn't imagine him leaving that room except for a significant reason. In that case, what? Isn't it natural to assume that one of those significant reasons came up? We still cannot be certain that's the case. Anyway, he's a fickle person, so it's possible he went for a walk by himself, unaware of the current situation. If that is the case, then we must act in all haste to tell him what has happened and ask for instruction. That's right. Although I don't want to think about it, it's possible something has happened to him, hasn't it? I'd rather not even consider such a sinister possibility. No one had seen Kinzo since the discovery of those 6 terrible corpses. On top of that, the phones were broken, the radio couldn't reach anyone, and there was no way to contact the police. Apparently, the typhoon would leave tomorrow and a boat would come. But until then, no one could rely on anyone outside this island, nor could they escape the island. The tragedy had hit everyone so abruptly that they'd lost all their composure. Everyone felt a heavy silence. Everyone was impatient. Even though they needed to do something, they couldn't think of anything. So some of them held their heads in their arms while others got irritated. Right now, no one could explain what was occurring on this island, Rokunjima. After that, we ate the breakfast Kumasawa-san had made, which felt dry and tasteless. Of course, this was right after something like that had happened. No one felt particularly hungry. However, we understood logically that not eating would weaken our bodies. It would also be rude to Kumasawa-san, who had made the breakfast. Kumasawa-san had taken some unusual Western vegetables, ones that Goto-san had probably ordered for his ultra-elaborate meals, and cooked them in a Japanese style, which made them turn an unpleasant color. As to what Goto-san had been planning to cook with those ingredients, right then I couldn't even imagine it. If I did think about it, it'd be reminded of the way Goto-san died, and a sour taste would fill the inside of my mouth. Everyone pretended to eat for the time being, but of course no one made much progress. Then we began pooling our knowledge of current situation. First off, 6 people, including Uncle Kraus, my dad, Kurie-san, Aunt Rosa, Goto-san, and Shannon-chan, had been found in the Rose Garden storehouse as brutally mutilated corpses. And yet, we still couldn't contact the police since both the phones and the radio were unusable. So until the typhoon passed, there was nothing we could do. Furthermore, Grandfather, who we might have hoped would be able to show a little leadership in this kind of a situation, had disappeared some time ago. Goto-san hadn't made breakfast, so Grandfather's stomach must have been empty. If he had just been taking a casual walk, we should have been able to hear him whining about how hungry he was by now. Despite that, he hadn't appeared. There was more than a small chance they had gotten caught up in the crime. According to my aunts, on their way back from the study, they'd searched for him, calling out on every floor, but were unable to find him. Considering the timing of it all, it's only reasonable to assume that this disappearance had something to do with the crime. I figured Dad and the rest were probably killed in the dining hall, then painstakingly moved to the storehouse. So maybe Grandfather has already been killed, and dragged to some strange place which we simply haven't discovered yet. No one actually said it out loud. This theory seemed extremely convincing. We'll go check that all the windows and doors are locked. We must also conduct a thorough search for Father. The children must remain in this room. Eva-san and Hideyoshi-san, I'm sorry, but please stay here with the children. I'd like to ask you the same, Dr. Nanjo. I understand. I will wait here. Aunt Natsui followed the servants, Genji-san, Kumasawa-san, and Kanon-kun, out of the parlor. All that was left was Aunt Eva, Uncle Hideyoshi, Dr. Nanjo, and the 4 of us children, a total of 7 people. Let's all stick together and maybe watch some television while we wait. Though I doubt we'll find anything good in the middle of the day on a Sunday. I know that feeling. Uncle Hideyoshi started acting cheerfully, trying to brighten up this gloomy atmosphere. Ooh, good show. Watch it, watch it. Ooh. Oh, really? You want to watch TV, Maria-chan? Then come and watch it with your uncle. Maria was the only one who joined in. Even though Maria had been told of her mother's death, she didn't show the slightest flicker in her emotions. Was it really normal for a 9-year-old girl like Maria to act so much like a very young child? Everyone else's mood failed to improve, and they each sank absent-mindedly into their sofas. Aniki, can I ask you something? What is it? Just now, in the storehouse, you said something about Shannon-chan in a ring. Did you give that to her? George Aniki didn't answer, but he hung his head and closed both his eyes. There could be no clearer response. Put it, Battler. Figure it out yourself. You're right. I shouldn't have asked. That's right. Me. Last night, I proposed to her. That was when I gave her the ring. I told her that tomorrow she should put it on whatever finger she wanted as her answer. I guess it was a pretty pretentious thing to say. And that ring had been on the ring finger of Shannon-chan's left hand. Well, several years ago, Shannon came to me asking for advice. About you, George-san. Wonder what she could have said. Shannon was always really bad at lying. It was obvious pretty quickly that you were the one she was talking about. She asked whether it'd be okay for her to get close to someone, even though she was only a servant. She asked about what kinds of things boys like, what kinds of clothes she should wear to make them happy. Lots of stuff like that. Well, I guess you could say I felt envious hearing her say that. So then she was given an engagement ring, and it all ended right there? Different people value things differently, but being proposed to by a man, well, it can be the high point of your life. So last night I'm sure Shannon was happy, the bottom of her heart. happier than she'd ever been since the day of her birth. George Aniki sighed deeply, without raising his head. Or maybe tears had risen to his eyes. It seems Shannon was on duty in the guest house last night, but because she was too embarrassed to go back to the guest house with me, she went over to the mansion. Think about how Shannon must have felt. When you receive an engagement ring, then no matter how much warning you've been given beforehand, it's perfectly normal to get so excited that your mind goes blank. She must have been incredibly embarrassed. Then Shannon went to the mansion, even though she hadn't been assigned there. Helped Goto-san with his work, and got caught up in the crime. If only I hadn't given her that ring. On that day, that place, Shannon wouldn't have... Sayo wouldn't have been caught up in that crime. Ah! Aniki, that's the one place where you're wrong. It's definitely wrong. So don't cry anymore. Ah... Butler-kun, let's leave him be. Aunt Eva said that After Aunt Eva said that, I stopped talking to him. Misplaced words of comfort might actually do more harm than good. Jessica sat down next to Aniki and put an arm around him. Maybe only Jessica, who had known about Aniki and Shannon's love from the beginning, and who had even discussed that relationship with Shannon, could comfort Aniki now. I went over to Aunt Eva and sat down in the opposite sofa. Butler-kun, you really are strong. Looks like you've kept a good hold of yourself. Well, look. The depth of the love becomes the depth of the wound, right? After all, it's not like how that old bastard died has anything to do with me. I feel bad about Kyrie-san, but, well, she wasn't actually my parent. My. If that's so, you certainly were crying a lot back then. Well, I did think at least that much crying was due as gratitude to the parents who raised me. Hey, Eris! The speed of that changeover and that dry tone must have come from Rudolph. That kid would always get violently happy, sad, and angry, but he'd always regain his cool immediately afterwards. Nothing like that. I haven't really been able to get over the shock yet. I think the only difference between me and everyone else, the kinds of emotions that stirred in me. What do you mean? I've been acting much calmer than George, Aniki, and Jessica. That wasn't because my sadness was any less intense, or because I'd already recovered. My sadness was simply getting replaced gradually with a different emotion. Rather than sad, I'd say I'm more pissed off. What bastard did this, and where? It's kind of been eating at me that I didn't get a chance to smack him upside the face. That was what I really wanted to do. I couldn't forgive myself if I just sat there, overwhelmed with sadness and hugging my knees. Since the time Dad and the others were killed, this island has been covered by the typhoon, which means the bastard responsible for all this is still somewhere on the island. Yes, that would seem to be the case. Wonder if they're hiding somewhere in that dark forest even now. Felt like I had a very similar conversation with Kyrie-san the night before. That's right. After the letter from the person claiming to be Beatrice appeared at the dinner table last night, we talked about whether or not a 19th person actually exists. Aunt Eva, do you think this murder had anything to do with the letter from Beatrice last night? Ah, that one. Well, I wonder. All of the siblings agreed that the mysterious letter was sent to further complicate the problem of father's inheritance. As to whether that and the case this morning are related, it's impossible to tell at this stage. Was the letter really given to Maria by some witch called Beatrice? How could it be? All of it was a farce devised by father, wasn't it? He made Shannon-chan or someone wear the dress from the portrait and trick Maria-chan, right? Isn't that just the kind of overly intricate prank father would pull? Last night, I talked with Kyrie-san about whether Beatrice actually exists. Kyrie-san also said that Beatrice was probably among the 18 of us. Isn't that obvious? There's no one else on this island besides us, right? Then there must be someone among us who's pretending to be Beatrice. There's no one else but us on this island, you think. Obviously, right? Are you saying there could be someone else here other than us? No one is on this island except us. There are only 18 people. So the one pretending to be Beatrice has to be one of those. Kyrie-san denied the existence of a 19th person by spinning the chessboard around. Even though Aunt Eva hadn't constructed an argument that complicated, Her opinion, at least, was the same. Except, if that's the case, our situation starts to look very ugly. At the time of Beatrice's letter, the whole thing could be passed off as a prank set up by someone or other. However, if we're assuming there's no 19th person, we can't ignore this anymore. In other words, there's no 19th person. The culprit who killed Dad and the others is also one of the 18, right? So in other words, the person who killed them is one of the people inside this very mansion right now. And Eva smiled meaningfully. It looked like she thought this conclusion should have been obvious from the very beginning. The culprit carried the bodies of those 6 into the storehouse. Even that was an impressive feat, don't you think? That shutter is always closed and locked, right? In other words, in order to carry them into the storehouse, the culprit would need to unlock the shutter. Understand? Is it possible the shutter was left open by mistake that day? The servant said it's always kept locked. In other words, unless the culprit took the keys from the servant room, there's no way they could have opened the storehouse. I wonder if the key in the servant room was the only one. Denji-san said that was the case, which means the culprit knew where that single key was kept and took it. Just now, I watched when Kennen-kun returned the key to the servant's room. The wall was packed with keys, and I don't think a novice would know where or what those keys went to. Culprit was miraculously able to find the storehouse key among all those. Furthermore, even though the key didn't have a tag or anything sticking to it, they knew it was the key to the storehouse behind the rose garden. And that means they also knew where the storehouse was. I'll say it even clearer. The culprit knew the inside of the servant room well. Her argument was extremely plain and clear. Bodies had been found thrown somewhere in the bushes of the rose garden. There wouldn't have been much to go on. However, if there was only one key to the storehouse in the servant room, and it was stored with such a large group of keys, a novice would not be able to tell them apart. This meant the culprit was someone who went into the servant room a lot and was familiar with the locations of the keys. The family members didn't normally go into the servant room, which means that one of the servants is the culprit. Sorry, but even I can't tell you any more than that. However, I'll tell you one thing. What's that? It's reasonable to think that culprits are multiple in number and fairly well armed. They'd have to be, wouldn't they? They had to assault the 4 in the dining room hall, kill them, drag a total of 6 bodies all the way to the storehouse beyond the rose garden, and arrange for that disgusting makeup and the graffiti on the shutter. There's no way that a single culprit could carry out all of that on their own, right? Makes sense? It made sense. Probably would have been possible for a single person with enough time, but it would take so incredibly long. Yeah, only one needs to know the servant room well. That's true, Pixie. It only takes one to know where the key is. Probably safe to assume that a significant number of people were involved. Ooh, what you're saying, that maybe... Hold on. Good. So what you're saying is that maybe all of the certain servants were in cahoots. Please keep it quiet, okay? Wouldn't be right to voice mere speculation like this. If it really is true, what would you do next? They might not let us leave here alive. This is an opponent who had no trouble killing Nissan and 3 others. Right now, the only ones I can count on to fight with me are the 3 in my family and maybe you, which comes to a total of 4 people, right? No better off than they were last night. In short, it'd be easy for the culprits to massacre the rest of us. I'd been playing detective with Aunt Eva, trying to expose the person who had killed Dad and the rest before the police did. Oh, that's fine, Pixie. I'm assuming that no one in the chat right now has played this before. If only I could cleverly penetrate the culprit's identity and stick the proof in their face. I'd been so sure that, just like in one of those detective movies, the culprit would then give up and surrender. However, the culprit would only surrender if there was no way for them to fight back. The culprits behind the crime on this island were far from helpless. and might even be able to massacre all of the remaining people here. And on top of that, this island was like a giant closed room, cut off from the outside world by the typhoon. They had a full day until tomorrow to kill, scheme, and camouflage themselves. In short, it wasn't a safe atmosphere where we could get very far by playing detective. The contrary, we were at a stage where we had to be scared stiff, since playing detective might displease the culprits, cause them to commit another mass murder. Well, it's just a possibility, right? But I can't bring myself to trust the servants yet. And that doesn't mean I only suspect them. Don't you think there might be some mastermind behind all this? A mastermind? Why do you say that? The feeling. Think about what the word servant literally means. It means someone who serves as someone else's arms and legs, right? It was a bunch of Ushinomiya family members who got killed. So naturally, there must have been someone involved who stands to gain from that result. It's also plain and clear. The Ushinomiya family had been right in the middle of discussions about how to distribute the inheritance when grandfather died. This case followed the standard form of any classic mystery novel. Crime was definitely caused by someone with ties to the Ushinomiya family and who was involved in the inheritance problem. Aunt Eva had probably read a few books in that genre herself. Her argument may have had a few blind assumptions in it, but it was a standard conclusion that anyone might have reached. I think most people would end up suspecting the servants, even if they used different reasoning to get there. Especially the story about the key to the shutter. That made it very easy to suspect that one of the servants was involved. That's why I don't like it. What do you mean you don't like it? I'm just talking to myself. Hehe. I tried to dodge her question by joking, but I couldn't erase the sense of unease welling up inside me. After all, her conclusion was such an easy one to reach. A conclusion that anyone could reach. I just couldn't be satisfied with that. I tried spinning the chessboard around like I'd learned from Curious-san. This was exactly why a servant couldn't possibly be the culprit. The servants really were the culprits. They wouldn't hide the bodies in a place connected to themselves. Why on earth would they use the Rose Garden shed if they were the ones in charge of the key that could unlock it? The police would probably immediately pursue whoever had been in control of the keys. It was even possible that some other facts might come to light as a result. The more we think about the servants as the culprits, the less reason they had to carry the bodies into the storehouse. But what if they knew we'd think that? Put the corpses in the storehouse for that very reason. No, that's completely impossible. When the police come and inspect the scene of the crime, they'll probably be able to uncover many things. No matter how carefully the culprits carried out the murder, some traces will definitely be found. In other words, they had everything to lose and nothing to gain. Think about it this way and look at this murder game from the culprit's side. Hard to imagine why they'd want to call attention to the corpses. Once the corpses were found, it would result in someone sending a report to the police, or it might make the remaining people more cautious, or it might make the survivors start to search for the culprit. None of these things would make life any easier for the culprit. Just like the words of the main character's mother in a novel I read recently called Higurashi no Nakukoro ni, which, out of this game, that is the sister game to this one. I say sister game. It's from the same producers. My friend Mochi's playing through that series. And it's funny to hear it referenced as a novel in this game. Every story needs to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Eliminating that beginning is essential for the perfect crime. Right now, we don't know where grandfather is. We don't know if he's already become a victim or if he's one of the culprits. But this state of confusion must be beneficial to the killer. The culprit has absolutely nothing to gain by showing us the bodies in such an obvious way and making us all realize there's been a murder. In fact, this is a perfect place to spin the chessboard around. In other words, showing us the corpses in such a flashy way must be the culprit's goal in and of itself. So at the very least, the culprit, the appearance of 6 corpses there meant more than the deaths themselves. In other words, the culprit wanted this murder on display. To whom? To us. This is a message. The culprit's trying to shove something in our faces. I don't know what it is. You're an idiot. Can't remember a letter from last night. At this point in time, this vulgar mass murder isn't making me feel anything except a malice directed towards all of us. Malice towards all of us, is it? Put it together, Battler. Each one of the survivors has some kind of connection to one of the victims. Uncle Cross's death brought Jessica the grief of losing a family member. The deaths of Dad and Kyrie-san brought me sorrow, while Aunt Rosa's death brought Maria sorrow. Goda-san's death probably shocked his fellow servants, and Chenin-chan's death brought grief to both George Aniki, who opposed to her, and Kanan-kun, who had loved her like an older sister. Everyone now on this island had received an equal amount of sadness. Aunt Eva was sure that the servants were in cahoots, but then how could you explain the deaths of Goda-san and Chenin-chan? At any rate, by this argument, the grief caused by the 6 deaths hit everyone but Aunt Eva and Uncle Hideyoshi. Even Aunt Eva, who had directed suspicion at the servants and acted as though she herself was beyond suspicion, could not be ruled out as a suspect. In the first place, she was able to argue that the servants were suspicious by focusing on the shutter's key. But if you look at it from the perspective of motive and who would gain, Aunt Eva's name rises to the top of the list. I know what you're thinking, Battler-kun. Uh-huh. Oh, no. Please don't tell anybody about my head so full of obscene stuff. I'm the one who's going to gain the most from these murders. Since I'm going to be suspected anyway, I might as well get it out in the open. I tried to dodge the issue by joking around, but apparently it didn't work. The inheritance will be divided into as many parts as there are siblings. But right now, I'm the only one of the 4 left. All of the assets of the Ushinomiya family will become mine. Uncle Hideyoshi heard you. He say, "Could you give it a rest? It's not funny." I'm sorry. I was just fooling around, since I'm going to be suspected anyway, no matter how much I try to smooth it over. That's why, from my point of view, this murder might have been designed to cast suspicion on me. Fortunately, my alibi for last night is weak. Tell me a bit more about last night? As you know, the discussion between the siblings of how to slice up and eat the inheritance continued until late in the night. But I don't know how late it lasted. My husband and I had woken up early that morning. We were so sleepy, and a little past midnight they let us go. We then returned to the guest house and rested there. Can anyone other than Uncle Hideyoshi prove that? No, wait, it's not like I suspect you or anything, okay? Oh, are you sure about that? I don't know if it counts as proof, but when we returned to the guest house, we were greeted by Genji-san, who asked if we needed a towel. I think that should be enough to prove we returned to the guest house a little after midnight. Though if my theory was correct, the servants would all be in cahoots, and that wouldn't actually make for much of an alibi. Hey, you've got a point there. Guess it means I'm playing detective with the real culprit right now, huh? Hehe. However, let me say this for my honor's sake. If I was after the inheritance, I'd never commit such a bizarre set of murders. After all, if I just wanted to make them forfeit their rights to the inheritance, it wouldn't matter to me how they died. It'd be much smarter of me to try and make their deaths look like accident. Especially if you're assuming I laid out some careful plan that involved even the servants. Got a point there. If you're killing someone for personal gain, you definitely shouldn't make it look like murder. Exactly. That's why I'm in such a blue mood. Police will probably treat me like the mastermind and investigate all kinds of things. Not fun at all. Aunt Eva shrugged with a bitter smile. It was just as easy to suspect Aunt Eva as it was to suspect the servants. So if we spin the chessboard around, does that make it impossible for the culprit to be heard, suspicious as she is? However, if that sort of argument always works, then the motive can never help us in any way. No, that can't be right. Knowing the motive must give us powerful clues towards knowing the culprit. That's why murders from all time periods disguise crimes in complicated ways, cleverly preventing their motives from being discovered. I don't get it. I just don't get it. Every time I spin the chessboard around, it keeps flipping front to back and back to front. Are my thoughts bringing me closer to the truth? Or are they... Aunt Eva didn't want to talk any more about that. So I folded my arms and headed to the window to cool my head a little. As I looked over the parlor, I saw George, Anarchy, and the others gathered, talking. Looked like they were talking about the magic circle that had been painted onto the shutter. As Uncle Hideyoshi thought back to that time, he started drawing the shape in the margins of Maria's notebook. I see, since Maria was second only to grandfather in knowledge of the occult, she might understand what it meant. I think it was probably something like that. There was a mark that looked like a variation of a cross. And then, surrounding the circle, all around the perimeter, were those closely packed strange letters on all four sides of the cross. And in the four corners, there was something written. Didn't look like the alphabet or something like that. It was what they call ancient characters. Around the top of the circumference, there was a small mark. 5 small circles arranged in a plus sign, and straight lines connecting them. Yeah, there definitely was something like that drawn there. How do you remember all this? Yep, there's no mistake in the shape. I don't understand the thin characters, but the arrangement was nearly the same. Everyone was staring down at the shape, so I stared down at it too. From what I'd heard, this had been painted on the shutter to the storehouse with some material that looked like blood. I see, this sure is unsettling. Grandfather's probably the only one who'd want to draw something weird like this. Seriously, where'd he go? I want to grab him and ask him what the hell this is supposed to mean. Jessica's voice contained impatience and anger. She hadn't gone so far as to say grandfather was the culprit, but she seemed sure that grandfather knew something about the culprit's background. That's a legitimate thought. Of course, if you were searching for a link connecting the Ushiromiya family to the occult, 10 out of 10 people would think of grandfather. I would also think of but, you know. Also, to a person who knew nothing of the occult, the strange mark would have no meaning, which meant that this might have been something addressed to grandfather. That's right, and the reason the crime was shown to the survivors was so they'd find this. In that case, where had grandfather, the essential recipient of this message, disappeared off to? Probably heard you guys shouting outside and went to look. He's been waiting for something to happen. Does this shape ring any bells? Ugh. Maria looked at the shape with a serious face. Maybe she was enthusiastic because this was her area of expertise. However, her appearance was that of someone separated from the events at hand, as though this thing hadn't been drawn on the shutter closed around her mother's corpse. My first impression was that the design resembled a German cross. Ah, certainly does have that kind of design. Does that mean it has something to do with Germany? The German cross was originally a crest from the religious order of knights, and was supposed to protect pilgrims traveling to sacred places. So in other words, this magic circle might have some religious meaning? This is starting to sound like gibberish. When I looked over at all of them, preparing to jump into the discussion, something shocked me. Maria was smiling, an eerie and incomprehensible expression on her face. It was almost as if she was making fun of everyone's ignorance. It was an expression I wouldn't have dreamed to find on Maria's face. And she laughed. That eerie, jarring laugh was something I didn't want to believe was possible, even though I was looking at it right in front of my eyes. You people aren't even close. Can't you tell just by looking? While everyone was busy being scared out of their wits, Maria kept on cackling happily to herself. After a while, that laugh was suddenly and abruptly cut off, but her expression still looked like it belonged to someone completely different from Maria. This is the 7th magic circle of the sun. The characters are written in Hebrew. Give it here. Sure. Maria stole the written materials from the stunned Hideyoshi's hand. She then started drawing another magic circle with a rustle, right next to the one Hideyoshi had drawn. See? It looks sort of like this, right? Yes, it was. Maria, incredible. You really do know a lot. Yes, Maria clearly has been studying up on her Hebrew. Jessica tried to smooth things over by praising Maria. Maybe she wanted to confirm that this was still the Maria we all knew so well. But Maria didn't answer her in any way in particular. Maria began swiftly writing unfamiliar characters in the corners of the shape. When Uncle Hideyoshi and Dr. Nanjo saw them, their eyes immediately began to open wide. Written on the top and bottom and left or right are the names of the angels who preside over wind, fire, earth, and water. Chasan, Arel, Forlach, and Taliahad. I am going to mispronounce all of this. I am sorry to everyone who understands. And in the four corners are the names of the four great kings, Ariel, Seraph, Tarsis, and Cherub. That's what she saw. Even if they hadn't been able to correctly write what they'd seen, when they were once again shown something identical, it wasn't difficult for them to realize the two were the same. When Maria asked them whether it matched, Uncle Hideyoshi and Dr. Nanjo nodded over and over again. There's no mistake, that's it. Sure, there were characters that looked like that. How were you able to write something like that? There were also characters written around the circumference. I know. Like this, right? She looks so arrogant. Maria quickly began to surround the circumference with more Hebrew writing. It's from Psalms of the Old Testament, 16th and 17th verses of the 116th Psalm. You must have at least read the Bible, right? Acting as though knowing this was only common sense, Maria laughed. For a while, everyone, including me, was at a loss for words. A little later, George Anarchy returned to his senses and slowly managed to speak. That's incredible. Surprised. So, what meaning does this magic circle have? It's a magic circle to borrow the power of the sun. He who wears it as a talisman, drawn in gold, shall be able to break free from the bonds of any prison, receive the power to gain freedom. Break free from bonds and gain freedom. Sounds deep. Word bonds is not limited in its interpretation to some kind of physical object. Therefore, it does not only hold meaning for people locked up in an actual jail. It can also refer to the release from mental bonds, such as ties of obligation and inescapable fate. Ties of obligation and inescapable fate, you say? That's also pretty deep. But I really don't understand. What does this have to do with those 6 bodies? Far from being released, they were killed and stuffed in a storehouse, weren't they? It's not like the magic circle was drawn for their sakes. The 6 of them were there for the sake of the magic circle. It's truly pitiable. What do you mean? What in the world do you mean when you say the 6 of them were there for the sake of the magic circle? Maria lifted up her pointer finger and waggled it as if she were making fun of us. What? That's written around the circumference. Can't you read it? Yes, this is clearly something out of Full Metal Alchemist. This is absolutely insane levels of intricacy. Can't you read it? Psalms chapter 16, verse 16 and 17. I'll read it for you. The Lord has freed me from my chains. I will offer to you the sacrifice of thanksgiving and will call on the name of the Lord. See? See, you say. I've got no idea what you're talking about. You're saying they're human sacrifices. What Maria had just read aloud was a vital part of the magic circle, and it was saying that sacrifices had to be offered in order for this magic circle to be effective. So human sacrifices had been offered inside the storehouse where the magical circle had been drawn. A heartbeat later, everyone else seemed to reach the same conclusion. Some people were shocked, and others spat out this was insane as they punched their knees. This was starting to get incredibly disturbing. We couldn't accept it or understand it. See? I don't care what kind of magic circle or curses other people believe in, I won't pick a fight with them. But did they really kill Dad and the rest as sacrifices for crap like that? I just couldn't stand that feeling. Compared to this, I preferred it when we were still disgusted by that theory about the fight over inheritance. As I started getting pissed off with a feeling between anger and sadness, I broke from the circle everyone was in and returned once again to the window. Something had gone insane since yesterday. There was that letter from the witch Beatrice that Maria had read aloud at last night's dinner. Ever since that point, it feels like this whole mansion and the whole island have been getting more and more firmly locked inside some kind of bizarre world. That's right. When I think back on it, that letter was an invitation from the witch. The ruler of the nighttime island had invited us inhabitants of the day into another world. The phone and the radio had been interrupted and the island was shut off by the typhoon, so you really could call this place another world cut off from the real one right now. Yeah, as this island is now, it's perfectly normal for a witch to send us letters and for human sacrifices to be offered up for the sake of magic circles. What will happen next? Will some weird people wearing goat masks start doing the Bond festival dance or something? Ah, it's hopeless, I don't get it. The inside of my head's all screwed up, and I don't even know what to think. Anger, sadness, the opposing emotions all swirled together. They started to suck me in. Unable to resist, I could do nothing but cover my eyes with my hands and trust to my mind and body as I started getting sucked in. Wait. Started losing heart, I began to recall a memory from when I was small. It was from when I was very young. I'd unfortunately seen a scary occult movie on TV. For a while, I hadn't even been able to go to the bathroom by myself. The old bastard gave me an exaggerated laugh and said this. Hey, Battler, why do you think they go through all that trouble to make movies like this about demons and the occult and such? Because they don't exist. Something that ridiculous can't be found anywhere on the planet. If they don't exist, people want to see them, go to a lot of effort in making them. That's why those occult movies just make me laugh. If I were forced to choose, I'd say, rather than demons and monsters, this year's earnings call and angry wives are 100 million times scarier. I'll go further, okay? My point of view, getting scared is a recreational emotion, something for people who've got room to relax both in their hearts and their lifestyles. They had so much free time they didn't know what to do with it, so in order to entertain their mind with unusual emotions, people started creating a culture with demons and the occult and stuff. Seriously, why have I been acting so damn thick-headed? I was totally taken in. Don't try to mess with me, this is the human world. I don't give a damn about witches, demons, magic circles, and sacrifices. The human who killed Dad and everyone else is still on the island. That's all there is to it, right? The next person who started speaking to my heart was Kirie-san. See, in both chess and shogi, when you reach the very, very last stage of the game and get closer and closer to cornering your opponent, the number of optimal moves you could possibly make gets smaller and smaller. Therefore, if you're backing someone against the wall, or if someone's doing the same to you, both players' moves become infinitely easier to read. In other words, when you're completely cornered and you think you have no moves left, that's the moment when it's easiest to read your opponent. However, when a person is forced into a defensive position, they can't help but lose their ability to think clearly, so they aren't able to get their minds around their opponent's moves. They have the same chin, Battler and Kirie. They do. And they also both have this upside down cross on their outfits, the same way that everyone else has all of the relatives have the one-winged eagle. I have a feeling that I know he says she's not actually his mom. I have a nagging suspicion they might actually be related. That's when you spin the chessboard around. With all my strength, I slapped my face with both hands. Now my eyes were truly open. And you don't understand anything, and you're completely cornered like I am now. Isn't that the perfect time to spin the chessboard around? While on the defensive, we can't even guess at the culprit's scheme. If we spin it around and look at it that way, just what might we see? First off, at the time the culprit committed the murders, they knew the island was being cut off by the typhoon. Or they should have understood that even if they carried out the murders, they wouldn't be able to get away early the next morning. In short, the culprit had begun without securing a way to escape. Furthermore, that bastard tossed the corpses in the storehouse, then was even kind enough to say, here they are, with that weird bit of graffiti. In other words, since we'd probably find the corpses sooner or later, they wanted to show them to us. If we'd all been dim and hadn't noticed the storage shed, the culprit's goal would not have been achieved, would it? If you think about it that way, that bastard of a culprit, since this morning they must have been watching our every move with bated breath. After all, if we hadn't been so kind as to discover what was on the storehouse, all of that hard work and preparation they did last night would have just gone poof. What did the culprit want to make us feel by showing us the corpses in the storehouse? All 6 of the bodies had their faces notably destroyed. Was it a grudge? A warning? The defacement of the bodies had occurred after death, so it hadn't been the means by which the culprit had killed. It didn't mean anything to those who had been killed. It did have meaning to those who found the bodies. The culprit wanted to make it appear that they had been killed so brutally. Ha! After thinking this way, I really want to tell that bastard to stop taking me so lightly. You could just dance off to that tune. If you're told, please be scared, can't you just say, really? Sure thing. You can't just say, sure thing. The chessboard is an artisanal waffle. Yes. People do die when they're killed. That's very true. When someone tells us the great Ushinomiya battler, the entrance is right here, I'm the kind of guy who will want to start to sneak in through the window. Next thing that had me concerned was the so-called magic circle on the shutter. As Maria, who had shown that her knowledge of the occult rival grandfathers, had recognized that magic circle was genuine. They must have drawn that thing in pitch black darkness, taking a lot of time and holding an umbrella in one hand. Isn't that amount of hard work and perfectionism impressive? What purpose would have been worth all of that effort? If we're looking for a fan of the occult in this mansion, most likely all of us would naturally suspect grandfather. Did they want to make us think grandfather was involved? But if that was all they wanted, they could have just drawn any old scribble that looked like a magic circle. It wasn't like any of us amateurs would be able to tell the difference between the genuine and fake. However, this magic circle was genuine. Furthermore, it had even been written in Hebrew. So this magic circle had a message that could only be understood by someone with knowledge of the occult. A message is a form of communication. By sending it, they were hoping for a reaction. Action? For some reason, we couldn't find grandfather now. I don't know how grandfather might have spotted the magic circle on the shutter, but did he choose to hide himself in reaction to that? No, was it a trap to make us suspect that grandfather had participated? You could read it either way, damn, that's annoying. What kind of reaction was the culprit hoping to get out of us by putting on this occult show? Somehow, that felt like the culprit's weak point. The letter from Beatrice that Maria had read aloud during last night's dinner sprang back into my mind. This was a freak who'd asked us to enjoy a battle of wits. Isn't that interesting? This is a battle of wits between us and the witch. Will we be sucked up by her occult game first? Or will we pull off her fake skin first? There's a whole day until the typhoon passes. Why not enjoy ourselves? Why not indeed? Finally noticed that the inside of the parlor had gone quiet again. Everyone had sunk into their favorite sofas, some deep in thought, some irritated, some acting depressed. Rio was once again enjoying the TV as if she'd never left it. Yes, we're playing Jumanji now, Pixie. Definitely. It looked like she'd found the commercials more fun. She found the commercials more fun than the boring program, and she happily yelled, "Ooh!" and giggled. I stared at each person's appearance in turn. There isn't a 19th person. The culprit must be in this room. Or one of the people who walked off. Very suspicious. Dead suspicious. Yes, Battler, it was you. Right now, Aunt Natsui's searching the mansion with the servants, right? We shouldn't say in this room. Thank you. This mansion is where the culprit has to be. After all, it's possible Aunt Natsui was behind this, and we still can't deny that one of the servants might be the killer. Anyone could be guilty. Still, Aunt Natsui and the rest sure are taking their time. Of course, it's not a small mansion, but isn't this taking a little too long just to walk around checking the windows and doors? Just as I was thinking this, Aunt Natsui and the rest returned. Not one of them was missing. But our relief was short-lived. Everyone looked at Aunt Natsui in shock. The talk I'd had with Aunt Eva started to creep back into my mind. The possibility that the culprits had enough in numbers or weapons to kill all of those 6 at once. Forgive me if I've startled you. I brought this to be prepared for the worst. Natsui's got a gun. Natsui's got a gun. Oh boy. After all, that thing in Natsui's hand was a rifle. At a glance, its silhouette looked a lot like a hunting gun, but it was unusually short and kind of looked like a kid-sized weapon. However, it had a weightiness to it that made it clear it was no kid's toy. That gun is Kinzo-san's, isn't it? Did you know about it? That's right. I remembered it was in Father's old collection, and I managed to find it. Whoa, awesome. Natsui-san, is that thing real? Yes, it's real. It can fire live ammunition. Long ago, Father used it to scare away wild birds. Why would you... Okay. That takes me back. Where'd you find that thing? No matter how much I asked him to let me touch it, he never let me lay even one finger on it. Oh. Grandfather had one of those? These? I didn't know that. Long ago, Grandfather was really addicted to cowboy films. That generation really liked this kind of rifle. Is that a Winchester? But I've never seen one that short before. It's on off. I remember, it's that gun. That really takes me back. That's the one Steve McQueen fired on Wanted Alive or Dead. Pixie is grounded for horrible jokes. Father sure has good taste. It's an item that the master ordered specially from America long ago. As you can see, it's a working gun, so please don't tell anyone about this. He's quite fond of it right after he managed to acquire it. It seems the workings that ejected the cartridges were more interesting to him than shooting it. He played around with it back in the forest all the time. Oh. Still, it's rather disturbing. Are you sure you should be dragging this out? This is to prepare for the worst. There was probably more than one offender involved. Furthermore, those horrible people killed 6 of us, including my husband. I have a responsibility to protect everyone until tomorrow in my husband's place. As Aunt Natsui-san said this, she slumped down onto one of the sofas and took a deep breath. She had been trying to find Grandfather, as well as check the doors and windows. Since Grandfather wasn't with her, she probably still didn't know who he was. I carefully checked all the doors and windows throughout the mansion. However, we must be prepared for anything. Everyone, I think it would be best if we all remained here. Oh, good point. If everyone's gathered here, then we can all feel more secure by keeping an eye on each other. What do you mean by that, Eva-san? Nothing really. Just agreeing with your opinion, aren't I? There's a stormy atmosphere between the two of them. Think about who was the most suspicious from the inheritance problem standpoint. Aunt Eva was the obvious answer. However, there was no proof that Aunt Natsui was innocent. Now, if you view Beatrice's letter as one of Grandfather's complicated pranks, and think of this crime as just an extension of that, there's more than enough reason to suspect even Grandfather. Also, Aunt Natsui thought the criminal was on the outside, but Aunt Eva thought the criminal was on the inside. In short, it was the question of whether or not a 19th person exists. That same question had repeated endlessly since last night's dinner, the letter from the witch who called herself Beatrice. So was the culprit among us or not? And did the witch Beatrice exist or not? If you assume that something as stupid as a witch can't exist, you're basically saying that one of these relatives here who share a common bloodline is the culprit. If that was too unpleasant, it'd be much more comfortable to simply accept the fairy tale-like character of the witch. A witch? A witch drawing a bizarre magic circle and offering human sacrifices? If I could accept that rubbish, I'd be able to trust all the people in this room. However, damn common sense got in the way. I kept repeating that witches don't exist. In that case, the culprit must be among us. In the middle of the seemingly endless rain, none of us could break the silence. Anyone got any theories yet? Curious as to whether people think the murderer is inside the house or outside, so to speak. Is there a 19th person? Or are we just looking at 18 people? Lunch ended, and the servants removed the tableware and went to the kitchen. The wind and rain neither weakened nor strengthened, and the island remained cut off from the outside world. At first, it seemed as though Natsui planned to stop anyone from taking a step outside the room, but when it came time to prepare lunch, she finally realized this would be impossible. However, in order to avoid having anyone alone in the kitchen, she told the 3 servants to go together. Because of that, the servants were the first ones given the right to leave the stuffy parlor, which had been packed with 11 people. Since breakfast had immediately followed that terrible incident, preventing most of us from eating much, everyone tore into their lunches in silence. We'll wash the dishes so you can rest a while, Kanan-kun, Genji-san. Do you want something to drink? I don't need anything. Kanan? I don't need anything either. You two must have been busy so early in the morning. It's no wonder you're worn out. The only noise was that of Kumasawa washing dishes, which resounded throughout the kitchen. Genji and Kanan sat in some chairs a short distance away, their eyes lightly closed. Just as Kumasawa had said, those two had probably built up a great deal of fatigue. But that didn't mean they could let it show in front of the relatives. Avoiding that was one of their virtues. After the silence had continued for some time, Kanan opened his mouth and muttered, Kanan, why did she have to die in such a horrible way? Forget about the manner of her death. It was nothing more than bad luck. Right. It was nothing more than bad luck. Both fell silent once again. Kanan's expression was filled with grief. I think that Shannon-chan's actually dead. I still can't believe it. Poor thing. Not being able to see her again feels like a lie. Just wanted to see her smiling face one more time. Kumasawa spoke, her back facing them. After all, Kumasawa hadn't seen Shannon's corpse, though she had no trouble mentioning Shannon's face. Kanan heard those words. It reminded him again of how only half of Shannon's face had been left, and his grieving expression twisted even further. Why did Beatrice-sama do that to Shannon? If she wanted a sacrifice, there were plenty of others to choose from. Why? Why? It's nothing more than bad luck. If we were less lucky, you or I might have been lying out there instead of Shannon. Or it could have been someone else entirely. Everything is left to fate. Genji-sama, you said the door to Madame's room was stained with traces of something like blood, right? The same substance that was painted on the shutter. Indeed. There was an unsettling mark. Almost as though someone with blood-stained fingers had been trying to pull on the doorknob. No, scratch through the door. What sort of unpleasant mark? What does this mean? Beatrice-sama came to visit Madame's room and tried to open the door, but couldn't. Genji thought back to the time he had seen those traces of blood on the door to Natsui's room. The substance sticking to the door around the doorknob, and the marks of something scratching against the door. It had definitely appeared as though someone had tried to open the door, but couldn't. How did the Madame avoid being chosen as a sacrifice? If only she'd been chosen, Shannon wouldn't have had to die. Just then, a loud, sharp noise came from the hall. Both of them turned around surprised. That's a pretty interesting chat you're having there. Let me join in too. Before any of the servants realized it, Battler was standing in the doorway to the kitchen. Afternoon, is Beatrice count as a person or not? For the purpose of the 18th or 19th person, Beatrice is not in the count that Battler seems to be making. Like, Beatrice is not being counted as one of the people. So, that seems to imply that, I don't think a ghost would count as a person, but, like, it's not an outside. Beatrice would count as an outsider, basically. Beatrice would be, like, the 19th person, or, like, a witch, or whatever. I don't know. It all gets jumbled up in my head. Battler-sama. How rude of us. Genji-san and Kanan-kun stood up, surprised and hastily bowed. But I didn't care about stuff like that. I was more concerned with continuing their discussion. I told them I was going to the bathroom, so they let me go. I thought I'd suffocate if I was locked up in that room any longer. I was about to come ask you guys for some water, but then I overheard something pretty interesting. You don't need to bow your heads or anything. Please, let me hear the rest. That just now wasn't really... Been listening to you for a while. Don't try to hide it now. So I'll ask directly. Who is this Beatrice? She's supposed to be a witch from a kid's story, but it doesn't look that way now. Kanan-kun averted his gaze. It's obvious he didn't want to talk about this, which only made me want to ask even more. While making an effort to smile, I grabbed the collar of his shirt. Last night, this would have been none of my business. But after this morning, everything's changed. Now that Dad and the rest have been killed, it is totally my business. I have the right to listen to the suspicious story, don't I? I glared into Cannon's eyes as he continued to avert his gaze in apparent pain. Since there was a big difference in our heights, Cannon had to stand on his toes, and it looked like it hurt a bit. Battler-san, please let go of him. Cannon-san isn't really hiding anything. Then you won't have any problem talking about it, right? It's only being out of the loop, you know? When I tried to further twist up his collar, Genji-san cut between us and spoke. In his expression, there were faint traces that he'd made up his mind to do something. Apparently, he had no intention of hiding it. I can tell you about it. Cannon only hesitated because you might have taken it badly, Battler-san. Hesitating, huh? Not very manly of you. Whatever it is you're talking about, it's even more unpleasant having it kept a secret. Tell me about it. It's not like we have anything better to do before tomorrow comes. A slightly spooky story might be the best way to avoid getting bored. Genji-san and Cannon-kun looked at each other, then nodded as though they had decided to talk. Understood. Please ask us anything. We will talk. Right. Then I'll ask. Who in the world is Beatrice? All I know is that she's a witch who lives in the forest of Rokunjima. I've heard it's a story grandmother or someone invented to keep people out of the dangerous forest. Is that wrong? No, it isn't wrong. As you say, Beatrice is a witch who dwells in the forest of Rokunjima. Battler-sama, I don't expect you to believe this all of a sudden, but Beatrice-sama exists. She is a real person, one who gave the master a vast amount of gold and worked by his side for many years. Huh? Aw, come on. Is grandfather paying you to repeat everything he says? I laughed like it was a joke. Neither Genji-san nor Cannon-kun laughed. Not even Kumasawa Ba-chan, who was avoiding my eyes, flustered, and she started washing the dishes. So unfortunately, I was the only one laughing. Painfully, bitterly. See, that's why Genji-san refused to mention it. If you really mean it, of course I'd take it badly. So, you're saying that a person named Beatrice actually exists? Yes. She has been working for the Masters since before the mansion was built on the island. She has most likely been working for him even longer than I have. What do you know? Curie-san's theory was off. Grandfather really did have a confidant called Beatrice. That person on the island now? Yes. I believe that she is here. Vague way to say it. Guess that means you haven't seen her face today or yesterday. That is correct. It's extremely difficult to say, but, Cannon-kun once again dropped his gaze, avoiding my eyes. Come on, don't just stop there. It's like freezing an inch before the blow, right? I urged him on, jokingly again. However, it looked like Cannon was still confused as to whether he should speak or not. Then Kumasawa Ba-chan whispered, Ho ho ho. I cannot see her face, because Beatrice-sama has no form. She has no... What did you say? Beatrice-sama has no body. Therefore, unless Beatrice-sama wishes it, common people like us are not able to see her form. I've heard that the portrait shows what Beatrice-sama looked like back when she had a human form. Seems he yearned for that figure so much he would often stand in front of that portrait. Oh. Beatrice-sama sometimes shows herself by changing her form into glittering butterflies. On the rare occasion that you spot them somewhere in the mansion, there's a rule that you absolutely mustn't chase after them. It's whispered that you will meet with disaster if you do. In fact, there was a servant who broke that rule and quit because of a great injury. Wait a sec, are you kidding me? Are you all serious about this? Battler-sama, Beatrice-sama has already arrived. Such language may be unwise. Beatrice-sama does not like it when she is profaned. If you doubt her existence, you will surely meet with disaster. Battler-san, you probably find this topic unpleasant. But you know what? Beatrice-sama does exist. She exists. Beatrice-sama hates people who doubt that. Can't you tell, Battler-sama? Beatrice-sama has already arrived here. Come on, quit it. I'm weak against that stuff. Enough with the cheap threats. However, there was no trace of a joke in the eyes of the three servants. On the surface, I laughed and tried to look unconcerned, but I was quickly starting to sober up. Her eyes were also sobering up fast. Battler-san, I beg that you stop profaning Beatrice-sama. Please trust me. Kumasawa Bao-chan, who was usually cheerful and would always tease people, now spoke with a totally serious face. Good night, Pixie. Well, even if you say she exists, I don't see anything. Are you trying to say she's standing right next to me or something? I'm joking around. Just then, that unnerving laugh suddenly filled the kitchen. We're gonna leave off on that.